Planning Board meeting for Monday, November 15th of 2021. This evening, we have all 5 members of the Planning Board, but Bob Schaffer is remote in Qatar, so we will be taking all votes by roll call this evening. We also have Jeff Morissette and Joe from town staff, and we have Paul Starrett, town engineer, with us as well. Before we get into our public hearing item tonight, we have open forum as we start every meeting. Joe, anything for open forum this evening from staff?
No, nothing.
No? Paul, anything from engineering? Anything from the board for open forum?
Nope.
Nope.
No? Great. We'll go to the audience for, oh, Bob, did you have something?
Nope,
Oh, okay.
no.
Yep. We'll go to the audience for open forum. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, Board. I'm Chauncey Chu of Green Needles Road. I am the chairman of the new group, the EV charging station working group that you folks were good enough to put together.
Awesome.
We had our first meeting last Tuesday, and we've discussed a couple of things. It was sort of an organizational meeting. We took care of a few housekeeping of items, and then we talked about the charge from the planning board. So we wanted to keep with the original charge, but we thought we'd add some specifics to its specific goals. So we'll be working up those at our next meeting, and then, of course, we'll present that to the board. I would like to thank both Siri and Bob Schaefer for participating in our meetings. They've added some valuable technical advice here, and I think going forward we'll depend quite a bit on getting some planning board perspectives in our discussion. So we really do appreciate those people's participations. Getting back to the charge here from the planning board, we'll have to make sure that we are complementary to the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, because they've put forth a roadmap which has a number of goals in there. So try to make sure that we are complementary to them. So are there any questions? I'll be glad to entertain any questions, comments.
Any questions from the board at this time?
Nope.
No, it's great.
No, looking forward to seeing your recommendations that I think you bring back to us, and the direction that you're taking your conversations in. I think from there we'll be able to give you more feedback. So that's
Okay, great.
It's great to hear the
That's
status
great.
update,
Okay.
though.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you
coming.
very much. Thanks for coming in for the update.
Actually, Dylan, you don't mind one thing I can add?
Of course.
I just would like to acknowledge Beverly Woods, who's the longtime director of NIMCOG, and Jay Donovan, the longtime assistant director, are both retiring.
Okay.
And I know NIMCOG's, and staff has been really helpful to town over the years, so I just want to acknowledge their longtime service at NIMCOG
Oh, great.
When do they leave, or have they already?
in the process. So I think Jay's officially done, and Beverly is about another month or so, another couple of weeks.
They are, Mr. Chair, having a function for them in Drake on Wednesday night. There is an RSV opportunity if anyone would like to attend.
Oh, great. Okay.
Reach out to NEMCOG for that.
Okay.
Are you stepping up?
Worn out from my...
Could I add just
course.
an open invitation? The planning board is welcome to sit in on any of our meetings in the future.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. Any other items from the audience for open forum? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public hearing items. The first item before us this evening is PB 2130, a limited site plan review and a stormwater management permit for 33 Robinson Road, which is essentially for a rehabilitation of the tennis courts and constructing 3 new multi-use tennis courts and pickleball courts at that location. We have the applicant before us. Good evening.
Wait a minute.
Am I wrong?
Oh, never mind. Wrong pickleboard. Never mind.
All right, we'll go to the applicant.
Good evening, Arson Hambard, Zoomin, Nestor Engineering. With me is my associate, Polito Aguilera, also with Nestor Engineering.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
We reviewed the conditions and we don't have any objections, so as you find it appropriate, we're ready to move forward.
All right, great. We do have draft decisions in our packet that we've all had a chance to look over, so if you don't have anything else to present, we'd go to town engineering.
Yep, no, we've been through this project. I would like to say that both the applicant, through our facilities department, and the designers have been very accommodating, and in our back and forth discussions is our first interaction with this firm, and we welcome them back in town. It was a good experience.
Great.
Thank you very much, mutual.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Well, then I guess, do we want to discuss the draft decision, or do we want to see if there's any last comments from anybody in the audience? I don't see anybody here who's probably for this, but we
Well,
could
it's
do that.
closed, so they
Oh, we
can't
did?
comment anyway.
Oh, that's right, we closed, that's right. Forgot about that, my bad. All right, well then, let's discuss the draft decisions. So, we'll start with Darren.
Yep, I have no comments. Engineering, it sounds like that they've had a good relationship with the applicants, so that's great. I think the only thing we were waiting for was the fire department comments, and those have been addressed.
We had no response back. Happy to continue to work with them, but we don't expect any issues whatsoever.
Great.
Great.
Thank you. Good, all set, Dylan.
Great, thanks, Darren. Mike?
My only comment was the fire department, so I'm good.
Okay, great. Kate?
I just had a few, like, clerical things. On the cover sheet for the plans, you just need to update with the latest date that you updated things. Right now it says October 16th, I think. and it should-
Okay, I believe we updated each individual sheet with a revision date, but we can
Yeah,
do that for the
just-
cover as well, sure.
And then, I did have, just on the project summary, just for clarity for anybody who reads it, on page 3 of 8, which is page 20 in the packet, number 21, personally, I would divide that into 2 paragraphs. The first, which I would make the new 21, would just be that at the November 1, 2021 meeting, applicant provided updates to the plan, and the planning board closed the public hearing. And then the new item 22 would be, the planning board considered the application in accordance, blah, 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 and then at its November 15th, on November 15th, 2021, the board voted to approve the project, just to keep the thoughts separate.
So it'd be similar to like it is here, but you would like it broken up
Well,
at this point
actually,
here as a separate
yeah,
item?
I guess this is better, yeah.
Yeah, I took your comments and I didn't track changes. I did send it to the applicant. They were fine with your
Okay.
suggestions.
Yeah, that's
So-
good, just, yeah, that's fine the way you have it.
Okay.
Gee, you can probably remember what I had better than I can.
That was the biggie in there.
That's all Oh, and then, there was the one where we mentioned the, condition about providing the calculations for the impervious. And then, because staff in their email to us had said that it should be for the total, that,
Yep.
the word total.
So you can
Okay, great.
check that out, see if it's to your liking.
Yep. You're good.
Don't tell them that.
It's review time. And I'm going, Bob. I'm almost, that was it. I think.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Bob, any comments?
Yeah, I have just one, and it's on page 22 of the packet and page 5 of 8 of the decision. It's under site-specific conditions, and it's number 1. It's really just a matter of cleanup, but it might be easier where it says signage for bus drop-off only. If bus drop-off only was either bolded or in quotes, just to make it stand off, 'cause it reads a little awkward. because that's the signage we're trying to put in, but it reads awkward in terms of how it looks in the sentence.
You want to remove the word only, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying if the signage is going to say bus drop-off only, just put that in quotes. Indicate what the sign is.
Gotcha.
So either bold or put bus drop-off only in quotes there so that it's clear that that's what the signage should read.
Yeah, and you probably want to, use uppercase on bus or something, but, what is the verbiage on the sign, and put that in quotes.
Got it. I think Joe has updated the document in real time here, and that is now looking like it's reflected in the most current draft of the decision.
Great, thanks, that's all I have.
Great. I had two things, I think maybe more questions. Number 16, so page 6 of 8, I guess that's page 23. In 16, it says erosion controls shall be installed prior to individual lot construction.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's actually applicable in this case, or should we say before work starts on the site?
Yeah, we can strike the,
Prior to
construction, we can
Construction,
strike
okay,
individual
great.
lot.
Great, so that works for me. And then the other question I had is number 21 on the next page, page 7 of 8. Prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, will a certificate of occupancy be issued for work like this on a sport court?
So there will be a certificate issued at the end signifying that everything has been built
Okay.
according to plans. So
Okay.
there will be a certificate issued.
Okay, great. Perfect, then that works fine. Okay, those are my only two questions.
Sometimes we'll see certificate of compliance. I don't, say.
Right, or certificate of completion, I was wondering
Yeah.
if that's what was, gonna be issued. I guess that was my not understanding if an occupancy permit was what actually got issued at that point for this kind of project. That was really just a question I had. Thanks. All right, so I guess we've gotten comments back from the board. We've got some changes in the final draft, and we're already closed. So given that, is there a motion, does somebody want to put forward a motion for the site plan review for PB 2130?
I move that we approve the application for limited site plan review of an exempted educational use for 33 Robinson Road as amended this evening.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the limited site plan review for 33 Robinson Road. By roll call, all those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Darren?
Aye.
And I say aye. Great, and then do we have a motion for the stormwater management permit for PB 2130?
You were doing so well.
I move that we approve the stormwater management permit for PB 2130, 33 Robinson Road.
Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Darren?
Aye.
I say aye. Great.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing the results. Good luck on the project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just in time for the release of the big tennis movie.
That's right.
What tennis meeting?
Well,
I just move to continue this?
Smith's doing
Oh, yeah.
story of the
So, yeah.
twin sisters.
You want to do it, or?
Sure. I move that we continue PB 2136, 22 Town Farm Road, Building 13 and 16, to our next meeting, December 6, 2021, at 7 PM, either to be held here at room 201 or virtually to check the agenda beforehand.
Second. Motion and a second to continue PB 2136. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Darren?
Aye.
I say aye. Those were our only two public hearing items. The next item before us is a general business item, and that is a discussion/clarification of subdivision rules and regulations, section 218-16C, regarding activity limitations within the right-of-way between November 15th and April 15th. And I'm told that there's a preamble to this section.
Mr. Chair, thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
So, as you may recall, whenever we occasionally receive questions about how we have been interpreting your rules and regulations,
Yep.
we like to bring it back to the board because they are your subdivision rules and regulations.
Yep.
And different boards over the course of time may interpret them differently. So recently, through some pre-construction meetings, a particular requirement, 218-16C, talks about construction activities for subdivisions for work within the right-of-way. And so there's a provision that talks about there really shouldn't be work of certain level of activity between November 15th and April 15th. So we just thought we want to, first of all, make sure that we are interpreting it as this board would like us to interpret it, or to discuss perhaps maybe the intent behind that. What is the meaning? What do you think it means? They are your regulations. And then we know we have some folks interested here tonight that may or may not want to have a discussion with you because they may contemplate requesting waivers from that provision. And as you're aware, the board can't grant waivers outside of a public hearing process, so I'm sure they want to get some perspective and insight from this board before deciding whether or not to seek waivers, and if so, to what extent they might want to seek some waivers. And I just want to caution you, for every individual project, the board can certainly make its own decision on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, you can't decide or commit to something in advance of the actual public hearing process, but I do think there are certain things that if you are willing to discuss that you feel strongly about, we don't want to necessarily have someone go through a public hearing process. If you can shed some insight as to your perspective today, that might shape what they do or don't do. So I don't know if the board has had a chance to look at that language that Joe has pulled up.
We got the packet this weekend, so I think we all read it.
Yeah. I do know that for at least the most three current, the ones that I think all the folks on this board might recall, either Juniper Hill, Cricket, let's see, Hummingbird Lane, how did I forget that one? They abided by those construction seasons, but that doesn't mean that prior, many years prior, things may have been interpreted differently. So we're just looking for clarification and your thoughts tonight. And the town engineer is also here. They've had benefit of their inspector throughout many subdivision projects as well, if you're looking for some insight, what's happened in the past.
Right. So from a format perspective, is there a specific ask that we're trying to speak to, or are you just asking us to opine on the nature of the language and our thoughts on it?
At the moment, we're asking you to opine because there were some questions raised during pre-construction meetings, and we just thought it best to get clarification about the intent and meaning. If you think we're looking to interpret this correctly, how do you think this should be interpreted?
Great. All right.
First.
Sure. Well, I'll go to the board then. Would anybody care to opine first?
Well, if I may, Dylan.
Please.
Maybe we should find out the purpose behind this.
Well,
Maybe we
that's-
ask town engineering
Sure.
their thoughts on the purpose
Sure.
behind this. And
That's what I was going to say,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul Starrett, Town Engineer. The engineering department is familiar with this, and we support it as written. We think it's an important part of your bylaw. This is not the measure of cover over a concrete pipe, or, the type or storm that we design our systems for. This is how you distinguish between the construction season and the not construction season. And this paragraph accomplishes that, so that we don't have work that's done in adverse conditions, and you and the homeowners and the town get the product that you're authorizing developers to build. So we very much support this, and caution you very carefully to make any considerations to flexing this one way or another. Having said that, we have always worked with contractors and developers to be as helpful as we can. We're not out there, we weren't out there today putting chains across construction sites, being November 15th. We understand that there is some, variations in the weather one way or another, a few days. We've, the highway superintendent historically, and I know that having talked with the Director of Public Works today, I anticipate that he'll be as flexible if the weather is cooperating. But this being New England, we never know when Dick Albert's gonna come on the screen and tell us, get your shovels out.
Right.
And get ready for the freeze. So this has kept our subdivisions in particular in good shape over the years. I'm not familiar, to answer Jeff's question, I'm not familiar with anyone who's ever even requested work in the way. I think that's another clear, important distinction, is we're talking about inside the proposed layout, not in where our utilities are, where eventually the road will go. This is not work outside of that area, which routinely does go on, beyond November 15th, if contractors and developers have scheduled their work such as they can be inside, they're under the purview of the building officials at that point, and that work has always gone on.
Yep.
But it's work specifically in the layout.
So I think my question is, so no excavation, trenching, paving, or other significant activity should be allowed within the proposed right-of-way. Now, having several conversations beforehand, the assumption is that you don't, and understandably want utilities to be in disturbing that lower layer where frost could get in and eventually freeze and make a road unstable at some point.
Yeah, that's one consideration. Erosion is another consideration. Once you remove the rooted layer or the plow layer, the surface, the organic materials, that which holds the underlying soils in place. Once you remove that and you remove the weathered layer of soil underneath that and expose the parent material, which has there's nothing in that material to stabilize it. And so in this case, you would be exposing, if the proposal is, and I don't know, like you, I don't know what the proposal is. If the proposal is to go in and grade roads, to remove those 18, 24 inches of overlying materials and exposing the parent material, then that could be accomplished before we have, perhaps, not being a weather person myself, not that anyone can tell us what the weather's going to be, but now you've exposed that to the winter conditions, and in the spring, now I have all that material exposed with what manner of stabilization. That's why we do in the spring, when we go out, we have the whole summer to stabilize the way, in particular, the materials that are going to be susceptible to erosion.
What do you mean by stabilize?
Keep it from when the rain, and the spring rain comes, and the grounds begin to thaw out, to hold it in place, to stabilize it, keep it from migrating down into the wetlands, if there are wetlands there, or down onto the Audubon Society land, or out into Carlisle Road, if we're talking about Diane. Again, we don't know the specifics of the proposal, but those are all soils we would want stabilized.
Now,
So you're exposing them in the worst possible time.
you mentioned putting in utilities, you thought that was okay.
Not.
No, not, okay, I want to make sure I
Oh, no,
understood
no,
it. Okay.
We don't do it, the town doesn't do it, we've never done it, I don't know anyone who does it. I mean, there are emergencies, you'll see the water department will be out fixing water pipes and things like that, under special conditions and circumstances, and using the right materials, but we don't do it intentionally.
But this doesn't keep the contractors or the developer from like clearing land in preparation for constructing homes or digging cellar pits and things like that.
Well, clearing is a tricky, that's not defined here.
Although we say we
Yeah.
have to put the road in before they can do that work, right?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So in one scenario, and perhaps the development community, which is represented here tonight, has already taken into consideration that leaving the A and B soils, those top layers of soil in place, would allow them in the spring to come take them out, even in a frozen condition, and reach the underlying materials. It's seldom that we get winters where we're gonna see, frost deeper than 24, 30 inches in that range. Whereas if they were to do it now, in the spring, when they're gonna wanna pave on April 15th, so they can get their building permits, we'll be in a different condition, because now all those underlying materials have been exposed. So now we're going down into frost in those levels. And I anticipate some animated discussions in the field about what's frozen and what's not frozen, and, you know, what the temperature was last night, and it rained in my neighborhood, but it didn't rain in your neighborhood, and you know, all the things that this eliminates from the discussion, because we stop construction, just like everybody else that I'm aware of, in that November 15th window. Again, plus or minus, because we're not gonna, if it's 65 degrees out on November 15th, which it wasn't today, but, you know, if it's reasonable, we can have some flexibility with our paving and other work.
I appreciate, this is such an unusual year because it's been so warm, but typically we have our frosts in October instead of November, so I can understand why this says November.
The warmest year on record, and also the wettest year on record. Our water, we did a test hole out at Colonel Rawls last week, and we had water flowing at, that's one particular test hole, one particular location, but it's representative of what we're seeing now. The water tables are charged.
Yep. Great. Well, thank you, Paul, for the perspective.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So, understanding in town engineering's position, anybody care to offer an opinion or a perspective then on the language as written? I kind of asked if we were hearing a specific inquiry or if we're opining, and I was told we're opining.
To opine, I would go based on engineering's expertise and experience, and I appreciate the explanation about you're freezing a lower layer that normally you want to keep, but now if it's going to be frozen in the spring, you have to wait for it to settle and such.
So actually, I have a question on
Yeah.
that. So, Paul, in engineering's opinion, is tree clearing significant activity?
Well, again, for definition, if you're talking about cutting down the trees like they have already done at Diane Lane, that I had, a parallel concern was that we had arranged on these projects, because we're short-staffed at the engineering department right now and having difficulties filling positions, and so we had asked for a 53G account to be established for this, for Wendell, for Spalding, for Colonel Rawls, because we just know we're going to need that support. And so, that was just another factor for us not having a person in place to take on that role. But, because we would like to, we'd like to work with them, so we made ourselves available in the case of just clearing the trees, because we could stop in and check, and they've done a responsible job from everything I've seen so far on that one particular project. But I knew that we weren't going to have to be out there on a daily basis, monitoring activities, monitoring the weather, discussing and debating the forecast, and all the thing, or whatever proposal may come your way, should one come your way. That workload we were just not prepared for. But tree clearing? Now, grubbing and removing and exposing all the underlying materials is a different story. Now you've removed, again, what I would argue is the more vulnerable time of the season, going into the more vulnerable season, where you can't plant seeds, you can't establish growth. That's one of the perils of clearing and exposing all those materials. None of you were here for the first stormwater management permit we issued on Preservation Way, and that's what happened. They went in and cleared and did nothing to establish growth, And significant portions of that project's washed down into the road and the wetlands, and we were out there, it was a constant battle. Because it was our first permit, and we were, we didn't have a regulation in place. And that got real messy out there.
And even if you did grant a waiver, it's hard to know how would you word a waiver, because you can't look into the future. You don't know if would engineering have to day by day say, yeah, you can keep going, or no, today you have to stop because they're forecasting, we're finally getting deep freezes, and
Yep, I don't know what it's all brand new. It's never been done before. I can't think of an advantage or a benefit for the town or for the future homeowners in waiving this. Obviously, we can think of benefits on the other side of the table, but there's no advantage for future homeowners here to know that. And I can say that it's been my experience, it's been all of our experiences with some of our most recent subdivisions, is home buyers are becoming more savvy about their particular subdivisions. They're doing research and they're finding things out and making discoveries. And so in this case, if anything were to go wrong, even if it's some unpredictable time in the future, I anticipate that people would start asking who allowed this? Who allowed them to do something that's never been done before?
Yep.
And that I'm aware of. And so that's a risk that the board would have to consider in granting.
Yeah. I don't think we have to go too far back in this board's
No, we do not.
time to, recall people who've brought concerns about the manner of road construction before
Yeah.
us to hear after the fact.
and I'm sorry,
No,
I'm,
that's fine.
but I was also thinking, even if you did grant it, if what you say at the spring end of things, you're gonna have to wait an extra bit of time to let the lower levels soils stabilize or something, so
Yes,
what time-wise, what do you gain? I don't know.
Unpredictable, I can't predict it. I'm sure that there will be very colorful conversations in the field with, what people's opinions are about, what the temperature was last night and how long it was and how much moisture is in the soil and,
Right.
it's all the things that may not be discovered for years after the project is done.
Yep. Understood. Bob, I'm cognizant of the fact that you're with us via teleconference only. Do you have any opinions or thoughts you want to share here?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add, when I listened to what Paul enumerated for the reasons why we don't do it and what we're trying to protect, I heard him talk about homeowners, and that might be ambiguous because that's the future homeowner, future purchaser. But I think we're also trying to protect the abutters, and we're trying to protect existing town right-of-ways as well. But I totally agree with everything. I'm all in favor of, being conservative here to protect all of these conditions as discussed.
Right. Certainly, we all are familiar with the volatility that can happen with New England weather. I
Right,
think,
yeah,
as Paul
this is
pointed out,
it.
you don't know what's going to happen over the winter.
And by, you may be taking the first steps to, establishing a whole new construction season here in Westford, or at least I can anticipate that there are other subdivisions that have decisions in hand that would say, hey, I don't have to sit idle this winter, I can start my project. I would anticipate they would want to be a part of that as well.
Right.
And that's, it goes back to, we would have had our 53G arrangements all made, but in our planning, this all came to light in the last week, so in our planning, we were thinking that we would start that process in February and retain in March and be ready in April, when normally projects begin.
Yeah. I guess one question,
We
Paul.
could, I want to say that we could, I'm sure we could find a way to get someone, you know, to do some work. I don't know how that would work out, but we could try.
Yeah. So Paul, I mean, you sort of mentioned that you don't recall any, or certainly many projects that have tried to work outside of the construction period, right? And
No, not
take
that I'm
interest.
not.
I have a question, though. The way that this is written, you know, it says between November 15th, April 15th, and then it also says during periods of rain, snow, or when roadway temperatures are under 40 degrees, except in the case of the emergency. So I read that as giving the ability for that window to potentially be longer if there are adverse conditions beyond that period of November 15th to April 15th. So my question is, do you, you know, you mentioned, you know, wettest, you know, year on record. Has there ever been a time when there's been so much rain in a period of time that we have halted people's ability to construct within the right of way, like during the summer, but we happen to have, we know that this is gonna be a monsoon-like week,
Right.
and do we ever ask people to not do this kind of work during those periods?
No, we're fortunate here in Westford to have a good collection of contractors that, you know, they know they're just making their lives more difficult.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are just certain things you don't want to do, you know, we don't even want to do when the weather is not cooperating.
Yeah.
I assume this is pretty typical all over the Commonwealth.
Yeah, checking with colleagues, I don't know anyone else that, you know, I'm sure there's research that others know, that I'm seeing knows that there's no one else that does it, or,
This is the only town, actually, for
yeah,
us,
yeah.
not to jump in on your conversation,
Right.
uninvited, but this is the only town.
So I guess that my thought is, I've got an issue with other significant activity, right? I think, I don't like the vagueness of that.
Right.
And what, from just talking with other engineers, I certainly appreciate the fact that, you know, we're not putting utilities in it and getting a road prepared in the wintertime with frost issues. What I'd hate to see happen is, you know, with 3 or 4 new projects that we just got approval, you know, these guys sitting idle till April 15th. I want to make sure that they're able to at least start doing something, and while it may not be putting in utilities and grading roadways, that they're able to access their sites, you know, and get work done up there. I'd hate to see them get shut down with a strict interpretation of this, but again, you know, then it comes up to other significant activity. I don't know how we go about doing that, but if we could put it out there, what wouldn't be considered significant, just to make sure that they can keep rolling. Or what, I don't even know what they'd want to do, you know. I just don't want to see them shut down.
Well, I think the mechanism is called out, right, in the.
Well,
waiver of
you know what,
compliance, right?
again, but that's coming for a waiver. I mean, I don't know that I'd grant a waiver to allow them to pave and put
Right.
drainage in.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
as long as they can get into their properties and keep working on it and do what they, get a start on it, you know, I think that would be appropriate.
You wanna,
That's gonna get a lot more complicated, but I'll let the planner and the director of land use
will, but-
management speak to that.
Yep, I will, but I've heard from everybody on the board other than Darren. Darren, what are your thoughts here?
It's kind of tough. I mean, I can see why the provision's there, and I can see why the dates are there. It's tough, kind of to Kate's point, if you say, well, it's gonna be really nice next week, well, maybe it's nice and through Wednesday, and then it gets cold again. So it's really hard to sort of define it if you don't have the set dates. So, you know what I mean, it's
Yeah,
hard to
yeah.
kind of open it up and be, you know, flexible with it almost on a daily basis.
Yep. And I guess to some degree, Jeff or Joe, can you remind me, is Diane Lane proposed to be a public way? Ultimately? So I think I think at least in my mind, there's a difference of whether or not the way is being proposed as private versus public. And maybe that's unfair, but in my mind, it's like if it's going to be a public way, the town is taking some accountability for, you know, the care and feeding of that roadway after the fact, versus that being a burden on the homeowners, which, you know, while I'm not insensitive to the fact that the homeowners might not know that the road was constructed at a period of cold, that could be something that, you know, I'm sorry, you live on a private way, you sort of take that responsibility. I own a home on a private way. You take that responsibility when you buy that house, right? Versus a public way that comes with a lot more burden on the town after the fact if we deviate from that, I guess I would say is one thought I'm having.
I guess, I agree with that, Dylan. But I guess the other thing, I think the thing that maybe makes us special as a town is we do also try to watch out for the interest of a future buyer.
Yep.
So while, you know, the future buyer may not have any visibility because they may not know who those are at this time,
Right.
we as the town need to do everything right so that our future taxpayers
Yep.
have had their rights looked out for them
Yep.
through this kind of a process.
Right. No, Bob, I agree. I guess if we're just sort of totally thinking out loud here, if we were considering a waiver for something like this against a private way, we would at least have the ability to potentially condition that waiver in a way where it could be made known to the future owners of those homes. Here, you know, with it being a public way, the town is just accepting the risk essentially that we might have increased road repairs or difficulty performing and delivering services like snow clearing and removal, things like that in the future because of the manner in which the road was constructed.
Okay.
That's what, I mean, I don't know, but, yeah, Jeff?
So nothing prevents the lot owners on a private way from in the future trying to get town meeting to still accept it as a public way.
Correct.
But, and I don't think any of the folks here tonight are suggesting, well, they can speak later, but are suggesting that they want to do actual paving. And I don't know that they're proposing to, what they're hoping to do for utilities and such within the right-of-way. I don't know if they're just looking to do tree removal. I don't know how much of the A and B layers, the topsoil and subsoil, they want to keep in place. So maybe it would be helpful if they want to maybe on a particular project or two, talk about what it is they would like to do.
Sure.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question, because something I would think like cutting trees, but
Yeah.
you're
Well,
saying the
that's-
stumping.
Seems like that's already been done, right?
But,
One job, yeah.
yeah, but even,
And we didn't have any problems with that, you know?
but even just general tree clearing outside of the right of way, they could still get access to do that kind of work.
Yep.
And I think they've done that. It's
Yeah, I mean-
pretty much clear cut over there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this
Yeah, Jeff.
really applies to the proposed right-of-way, so other activities within, say, the lots, the future lots, that can still proceed. This is confined to the proposed right-of-way.
So in theory, a separate access road that wouldn't be the ultimate right-of-way could get put down to allow access to the site as long as it's not in the proposed right-of-way. Is that true?
I'd have to see a plan to,
Right.
But it would leave this town's right away, right? So it would be in effect in our right away, so.
Oh, okay.
But it doesn't say here that you can't access, you can't access the property going over the proposed right-of-way. It just says you can't
Do
work.
major
Do work to it,
excavation,
so,
right,
yeah.
you can't clear
You can
it.
drive over it to get to
Right.
inside of the site.
Right.
You just can't do anything to improve it.
Yeah, and turn it into a way that's suitable to ultimately have
Then you
pavement.
take a look again at Carlisle Road, right? It's going up a hill, and then you're gonna have runoff. I mean, if they're not able to stabilize it, if they haven't already, I've been up there.
Yeah.
Right, then
Yep. Yeah.
how? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
snow and
yeah,
ice
yeah.
and.
Yeah. Seems like we have members of the audience who'd like to comment, so please.
Sure, Dave Guthrie, Enmore Road. I think, you know, for us, I've been doing this since 1993 in town, and for us, this was always under Mr. Barrett. We're not going in your right-of-way, November 15th, April 15th. And we're certainly not paving our own right-of-way from November 15th to April 15th. That was steadfast, that was non-negotiable. There were no waivers in place. Could have been 80 degrees on November 16th, and you weren't paving. That was his rule. It was steadfast, it was hard, it was non-negotiable. It was never work in our own right-of-way. Been doing that for 29 years in our own right-of-way, which is potentially your future right-of-way. We've never had to come up against this, ask for a waiver, have a discussion. We're doing it in Littleton right now. We did it for 4 years over there. We're doing it in Chelmsford right now. So when Paul says it doesn't happen in any other towns, it's happening in the two abutting towns. Regarding the stabilization, you know, there are some arguments there for that, but quite honestly, we're not growing grass after October 15th, and certainly not much before May 15th. So if we're opening things up in September and not getting grass in before October 15th, we're subject to the same sort of lack of stabilization that we're facing today. However, grass is only one mechanism for stabilization. The burden's on us. We've used on 160 acres at Summer Village, we used shredded stump to stabilize our banks. And it worked very well. We used it at Village at Stone Ridge, 110 acres. It's just another mechanism. More expensive than grass for us. we've got to do things twice because we'll have to take that back out in the spring and then grass it again. But that's the cost of doing business if you want to work outside of the 7 months of ideal weather.
Yep.
So, you know, I get it, I understand the concern. I'd also touch on the fact that when you get into significant activity, there are certain things on the list that we must do with either town engineer's review on site, the water department's review on site, or the third party that we're paying for. Whether it's laying water line, storm drains, storm components, the gravel base, if you will, and the asphalt. Those things are all monitored when we do them, daily. We need daily sign-offs on the pieces that we put in. But when we stump and grub, they don't come out and watch that. Or if we grade it to sub-base, they don't watch that, because there's no harm. You can't do anything wrong. You understand what I'm saying, Paul. Of course, you can do things wrong. But if you're with a reputable contractor and a reputable developer, those things aren't done wrong. So we do them all the time. And as far as protecting the neighbor, if we can clear and grab the lots, aren't the neighbors closest to the lots and not the roadway? So there's a little contradiction in your bylaw here. But I think really rather than introduce waivers, which I guess would potentially allow the freedom to do anything, break this thing down into what actually we're asking for versus what you, for 100 years, have imposed inspections on. And we're not asking to do anything that requires inspections in this off-season. And if we were, that would be a conversation between us and the highway department. And most likely it would be it's either too wet or too frozen, or we don't like that stuff this time of year. And typically we haven't done it. But to get in and not stump and grub and bring to grade and harvest rock and look for ledge and potentially do its blasting all this off-season, in my opinion, it's foolish, and we lose 5 months of construction time. We're not laying water line, we'd need an inspection for that. We're not laying septic line or drainage lines, we'd need an inspector for that. We're not bringing the 12 inches of gravel in, we'd need an inspector for that. And we're certainly not paving. But the other items I think you should put under consideration that they're probably not deemed significant because those items don't require an inspector. And if they were significant, I think you would have assigned an inspector to them prior to today.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anybody else from the audience?
Yes, Douglas DeShane, representing KMR and George Allen Construction. I guess as an attorney, I always look to the rules, and I must respectfully disagree with the interpretation that I've received from town council that says that this bylaw actually provides two prohibitions. One, it essentially says there's no work allowed between November and April. And secondarily, there's also no work allowed during periods of rain, snow, or when road temperatures are under 40. If that was the intent, it's written wrong. It should say or and. To me, that comma is a qualifier that says you can't work between November 15th and April 15th during periods of rain, snow, or when roadway temperatures are under 40. That makes sense. That's the way it was written, and that's the way I think it's been applied. As Paul said, you know, if it's 65 degrees on November 16th, no one would have trouble with some work going on out on these sites. So that's the way I interpreted it, and I'm not here to, you know, fight over the interpretation, but rather not fight at all, but talk about the application. I agree with Dave. My clients are not suggesting that they be allowed to do excavation, trenching, utility installation, paving, or as David understands better than I, how that subbase is put together. And I agree, those are the things that have significant risk when you have rain, snow, or roadway temperatures. But my clients are all looking to be able to cut the trees, grub it, and just grade in that road. Now, I do know that as you open property, there are risks of erosion, okay? I will remind you that if there is any work within 100 feet of wetlands associated with this work, there's already a prohibition in our notices or orders of conditions that allow no work, you know, during, I think their time is December 1st to April 1st. So even have a smaller window. And So there's no work allowed there, and a big reason for that is stability and chance of erosion. However, I will tell you that if we come in with a proposal to work within the Conservation Commission's timeframe, as long as we can show that there is no opportunity for that erosion or those other problems, the commission has been very reasonable in allowing work outside of that within that window. And I believe in all of our decisions from the planning board, we're tasked with controlling erosion at all times, zero tolerance. So I do think that we have the ability to protect against erosion that would occur if we're at least allowed to cut trees and grub and grade. I mean, even if it's an extraordinary requirement, that if you're going to do that work during the window, maybe you have to have some extra erosion control, or maybe you have to have extra stabilizing material on site so that as you open it, you can put down the shredded, or, we can control it. So I guess I'm saying what Dave's saying is, I don't want to have to come, and I don't suspect we'd be coming in here for waivers to do paving or trenching or utilities. But I think it's a shame if we have to come in for waivers, especially where, some of the members have already said, why would we have a waive anything? When what you're looking to do is that grading and grubbing and just, getting the road so that you do have access. We can't build temporary accesses. Our plans, there's never room for it. You're going to destroy something making a temporary road. So what I was hoping to accomplish tonight was a discussion of, what is that other significant activity, and what are truly the things that the engineering department, the planning department, and the board can feel comfortable saying, look, if you're going to do this, you're going to cut, you're going to grub, and you're going to grade, just give us a quickie understanding of what you're going to do for erosion control, and that's the kind of thing that you could do without a waiver. If someone has not an emergency, but if someone feels they want to come in here and ask for a waiver to put in a water line or put in a drain line, then I suspect they better have a pretty darn good story and show how that, if they're allowed to do it, how they're going to take special, extraordinary steps to ensure, that none of the fears that we have about doing the work in the winter occur, and a good reason why. Again, waivers should be a real exception. But the only way they can truly be real exceptions is if we can define, some of this other work that we're less concerned about that should be allowed, as a matter of right through the engineering department or through planning, as opposed to having to come to a waiver.
Yep.
Let's minimize the waivers and we won't come for them,
Yep.
But anyways, that's what we're hoping to accomplish. I can speak for my clients. I think what they're looking, and Mark, you can make sure I'm saying this right, they're not looking to put in lines. They're not looking to pave. They're not even looking to finalize, base coats or anything else. But they need to get into those sites.
Yep.
So that's what we're hoping to get to. Now, Mark, I definitely want you to speak, because one good example of this is with the Colonel Rolls project. We've got to replace that pipe under the, under the crossing. And it's actually a good time to do it in the winter. Conservation's already given us approval to do it after December 1st for a lot of reasons. It'll be protective and it'll be easier for us to do it. But it actually could theoretically run afoul of, your thing. So,
Right.
That might be one where, a waiver is what we'd have to do, and we'd come for it because we have a reason and a justification of why it's in the best interest, and that's to protect the, the wetlands and the brook and all that. So it's best to do that in the winter. But in any event, Mark, you can talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, I think what Doug was mentioning was the very first part, probably the first 300 or 400 feet of Colonel Rolls Drive, doesn't really even access any houses. But it accesses the entire site. It's the only way into the site. There's already a gravel road there. There's a 30-inch culvert that needs to be replaced. And once that's replaced, we have to put in a new 15-foot span bridge, basically. And in order to accomplish that, we need to bring the roadway grade up. We need to put in all of the retaining walls, and all of that work needs to get done at the same time, because you've got structural reinforcement for the roadway that to support the walls. you've got the culvert. If that first culvert goes in and there's no fill next to it, you're basically building a roadblock. So we absolutely need to get that in. And looking at, like Doug pointed out, you know, between November 15th and April 15th, we have routinely worked in roadway construction. We haven't done any trenching, but we've done a lot of work with grubbing, clearing, and bringing the road up to subgrade so that when the temperatures are workable, we can go in and dig and trench for all the utilities and whatnot, which doesn't usually get done until after the road's at subgrade anyway.
Yep. So, Mark, are you talking about projects in Westford or in towns that abut Westford or around?
Westford too.
Okay.
Yeah, and other towns. I mean, there's plenty of other towns I've worked in where they've done
So I guess, I'm sorry.
not only
then-
public roads, but private sites
So
throughout the winter.
Am I the only one on the board that's confused? Because I'm hearing that we've done this kind of work before in Westford, but
We
yet
have.
we don't have any record or
recall.
recollection of doing that.
We haven't done any trenching, but there's been significant amount of other work and roadway prep and site prep that's occurred.
Did that happen with the benefit of a waiver, or was some special exception granted by this board at some
To
time?
be
that
honest,
we can-
I started working here in 1996. This is the first time I've ever heard of anybody having to get a waiver to work after November 15th and a right-of-way. What was originally explained to me, if you scroll up to the beginning of this section, section 218-16 is titled surfacing. So what this original was adopted for was when a developer or a contractor would go in, they'd build their roadway, they'd put the binder down, and then at some point during the winter, they would trench through the binder to put in utilities, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they'd backfill with frozen material, they wouldn't compact it right, and they'd put new binder down.
Yeah,
And then that would go through, and then they want to pave in the spring
yeah, yeah,
to put the finished paving on.
yeah.
That's what this was intended to prevent, because the binder is supposed to sit, and everything is supposed to sit through one winter to make sure everything freezes, thaws, and settles appropriately after the binder's down. And this was to prevent any paving, any work in the right-of-way, whether it's public or private, but any work within the right-of-way once the binder's down, because it's under the section of surfacing. So that was the way it was explained to me when it was first implemented, and that's the way the developers interpreted it, and prior engineers. And I think Dave can, he's got more history with actually building the roads.
Yep.
So he can speak to, what's typically done in the winter, but typically what is done in the winter is we're allowed to clear and grub and grade, and like Dave says, is,
So Joe and Jeff, I guess what has changed then?
So I can't speak to what happened before my time here. We did take a look at a number of the subdivisions
Yeah.
at that time. And to my knowledge, I don't know that any of that activity has taken place. I don't know if maybe it did for Lawton Farms. I don't know. But that
All
was,
my stuff, really, and let me explain it just as simply as I can, and it does reference your highway superintendent. He was the one that sort of ran the gavel, if you will.
That's what I was going to ask.
Absolutely.
Is it
No question.
the transition of the highway
And
superintendent that's starting all of this?
November 15th, you didn't pave after that, non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Your own roadway, working your roadway. If our roadway was paved on November 15th, we didn't touch our pavement our own pavement after November 15th. It was non-negotiable. Pavement was off limits at that point. And trenching into that pavement was off limits at that point. Any work prior to that was really a conditional based thing. And again, the items that are sensitive to that require inspection, so we would have to call for an inspection.
Yep.
Whether it be the water line, the storm drains, any of that stuff. The sub-base coming up, the gravel sub-base prior to asphalt. Couldn't put that down if it was sitting on a frozen base, which is the layers that Paul spoke of before. They'd come out, they go, everything's frozen, boys, you can't put the gravel down, there's no way you're gonna pave. Even if it was November 10th, because you can't pave over a frozen surface.
Yep.
We'd understand that, and that's what would happen. So, as far as working out there, we did it all the time. I've done it on every deal I've done in town. This is brand new to me. I've never had this issue. But paving was always something that was highly, highly protected, independent of the weather, right? For, your Oak Hill Road job, you're going to pave after November 15th. We never had that privilege, ever. We asked for it, and it was never granted, period. So, are the rules changing, your personnel is changing, you're into a DPW director, you've got a larger engineering department now, maybe things are changing, but they're changing, and, you know, caught us off guard, caught their clients off guard, we're all caught off guard by it. We're you know, and Joe comes in, and the note said, no, they don't mean our own subdivision. That's never happened before, and it's honestly never happened. We've worked in those subdivisions, every single one of them, since 1993 when I got here. We do it in abutting towns right now.
So I don't think this was in place till 2004. I don't honestly know what happened between 2004 and 2013. All I can say is from my time here, the more recent subdivisions, they seem to know about this. They didn't ask to do that work between that time period, so it did not come up. And we are simply looking, it's not Joe, it's not because Joe is new here.
Yeah.
We have this language.
No, not at all.
We just want to make sure
Yep.
they're your rules and regs.
Yep.
It's what do you think they mean?
Yes, but are our rules and regs being interpreted differently due to transition of some of town staff, not town planning staff, town staff at a more macro level?
I can't answer that. To my mind,
Sounds like that's what's happening.
And so, if I may ask, you said that they haven't asked since you've been here, but do we know if they've been subgrading roads?
I know that for subdivisions that the engineering department has been involved in, where there are inspections, they don't try to do those activities, is my knowledge.
Right, so as Mr. Guthrie just said, that they don't look for those inspections, those major items, but they could be grubbing and preparing in the past few years. We wouldn't know.
All I
if they
can
don't-
tell you is the last 3 or so subdivisions that I was more familiar with, they did not.
Well, it says, you know, it looks like Juniper Hill, we allowed some stuff to go on down there.
You had benefit of an earth removal
Right.
permit in that case, and portions of that happened in the right-of-way, and they made the argument that it was removal of some sand. It did not, it had nothing to do with the actual construction or preparation for the roadway itself. In other words, getting it to the grade of the roadway exactly, or prepping it, you know, to build up. So in that case, they made the argument that it would not have an impact on the long-term viability of the roadway. It's your regulations, you have a lot of discretion, particularly as was pointed out, the other activities, the other significant activities. You have a lot of discretion there. It's not called out like they say. Ideally, this language would read very differently. It'd be much simpler, clearer. And that's why we're here, to get clarification. What do you think it means? And then a separate question is, since we have a working group to update this, what do you think it should say? But the question before you tonight is, how do you interpret your own rules and regulations in the here and now, the way that it is written?
Well, I can understand engineering's point of view. They're concerned about anything where you actually are going into the soil, where you're doing any work like trenching, road preparation and such. And as you said, this is under that section of the subdivision,
Surfacing,
the
yeah.
surfacing. So I agree that I think it's anything that has to do with roadway preparation, utility preparation within. Now, I have trouble with the right-of-way versus the roadway, that say the utilities are going to be away from the roadway, the pavement. Is that also a concern?
It would be to the engineering department.
Okay, so.
And I'm sure Mark will share examples of the roads that were done under these conditions. Certainly not since I've been here in 2005. We've not done any of the road work. But what they described, I'm in the dark. Nobody's given me any idea of what they want to do, so I can't evaluate anything. In my previous discussion, we're based on protecting this section of the subdivision rules and regulations to prevent people from going out in adverse conditions and doing things that we've never allowed before that I'm aware of.
Right.
But, to hear discussions about rocks and blasting and, cutting down trees that outside of the way, then that has nothing to do with this section,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I understand
different
what
things.
town staff is asking of this board. I will say, and I'll just speak personally, I don't consider myself enough of a civil engineer to determine whether grubbing, grading, and blasting does or does not constitute significant activity. I would look to engineering staff to offer their opinion on, is that a significant activity that should not be done during the months of November 15th to April 15th? And if the town engineering says that should not be done, I would tend to fall down on, okay, we probably shouldn't do that.
And I would actually go a little further and say, if there's a specific request, a plan to say, if we're gonna grub this, so we're gonna take some rock out, and we're gonna limit any potential erosion by the controls we said we can do, then that can be looked at.
And I think the mechanism for that is clear in the waiver process, and Attorney DeShane, I understand that don't seem fond of the idea of coming before us for a waiver, but I do think I would prefer to hear it that way than have this board give some arbitrary, well, we're sort of okay with this, because I will tell you that just personally, I am not looking for another reason to have disgruntled homeowners come before us arguing that the roadway was constructed poorly, and now there's, dragging this board into some discussion around the relative quality of a roadway that may or may not have been partially built during a period when the town's bylaws say don't, or subdivision rules say don't build the road during this time. Because that was not a pleasant experience.
And rules and regulations tend to protect us from the bad
Right.
developers, not
Right.
the good ones.
But they punish the good ones. But understand, I can appreciate that you want to hear what the story is, and obviously if it's a reasonable story, you got to be reasonable granting the waiver.
Right.
90 days from the time I decide we want to come for a waiver, and we can actually act under that waiver. 90 days. So if I throw in my first waiver next week, I can't possibly get approval to work until February. I mean, think about it. I file next week.
Yeah.
I get on you December. I get my decision in January. Is there an appeal period of that? That's another 20 days. Plus with all the writing and filing and recording. Guys, it's 90 days. I do it every day. That's what it'll take. So, it's crazy. But I think from hearing, everybody's experience, that bylaw has been applied. But it's been applied in a manner that it seems like the highway superintendent was very clear on the kinds of work was not allowed under that.
Yeah, but to
But
be
it-
fair, the state does that too, and they might say, oh, it's been a mild fall, we're gonna extend it beyond November. It's not just our former
Okay, no, I'm
highway
just saying,
person.
no, my point is,
What he's saying.
nobody, the reason we haven't come to this and there hasn't been waivers is because the developers have recognized, I'm not gonna be able to pave, I'm not gonna be able to put in utilities during that time frame. But they have been able to understand that if I wanna just go cut trees, grub, and, grade things out so I can get into my site, that the powers that be have recognized that work as doable during that time and haven't required waivers. They
Right.
just have said, that's not the work
Right.
that this was intended to.
Right.
So I guess the question is there a
No.
set of work? And I
So what
know,
you're telling us is somebody now has applied has
Yes.
said that to
Exactly.
you.
Yes.
What Mr. Guthrie basically told us, what I think what is happening is there was an interpretation of significant activity that aligned that to only things that required an inspection.
right.
That now it's being generally interpreted that anything in the right of way is.
Really project
So something has changed within towns,
Yeah.
the overall town staff, that the interpretation of significant has changed, is what I'm hearing. That's why we're
Yes,
having this
that's,
discussion.
I think that's it.
That's accurate. I think, the issue is, you can work on the lots, but quite honestly, if you don't have some sort of road prepped, it's difficult to truck
Yeah.
in and out of there
Yeah.
with balancing the lot. Doing the work that doesn't require an inspector, if you will,
Yeah.
allows you to prep your lot, possibly balance it again, manage the rock that's in there,
Yeah.
crush the rock if you have to in the off-season.
Yep.
And get generally prepared.
Now, yes, is erosion out into the main road a concern? Of course, the burden's back on us, right? And we've done this numerous times on thousands of units to manage that stuff. So I understand Paul's concern, not specifically towards us or towards Mark and Doug's client, but as a global development community, there has to be protective of anybody and everybody that comes to town. But I think the reality is, that's what your inspection process is for, and that's where your greatest risk is in your water line, and your storm drain management system, and your subbase, and your paving. And that's why you've required either one of the engineers in town or the third party that we post money to inspect. Anything outside of that, you don't come watch anyway.
Yep.
And the reason, I won't speak for engineering, but my experience as an engineer, the reason you don't do that is because there's little to no risk. And anything that becomes critical is inspected, signed off on in real time that day before we can proceed.
Yeah.
We hire a water inspector, someone from the water department, 8 hours a day when we lay water line.
Yeah.
Every connection is inspected, what it sits on is inspected, so you lose your risk there. But harvesting rocks,
Yeah.
stockpiling for crushing, balancing the lots against the roadway.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I think we get it. So, Jeff.
Can I add something too?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry to cut you off, but I think what also is different in this case is that a lot of the projects that I've been involved in, they're approved early spring.
Right.
Start construction in the summer.
Yep.
Continue through the fall, continue past November 15th, so everything is moving in flow. And nobody even thinks about that bylaw because no one's ready to pave. They know they're not gonna pave. If they wanna pave, it's gotta be done by the 15th of November, otherwise they wait till April.
Yeah.
But the work continues to go. In this particular case,
I just
we
want to make
have,
sure I understand that point. I'm sorry, can I ask you a question?
sure,
What you're saying is, if your application got approved in May,
Mm-hmm.
you've already done the work that would disturb the site, the grading and the stuff we're talking about. You've already done that stuff not in the window where you can't do anything. You might not pave yet,
Mm-hmm.
and so the soil is gonna be in the same condition that it would be if you were granted the ability to do this now. It's gonna overwinter the same way it would if you did it now, and you might not pave until the next spring.
right.
And excavate and do all that, I think what I'm
That's
hearing.
not
Well, I think
correct, but I'll let the
that's-
planner explain
That-
what you have to do before you can get a building permit.
Right.
I think, Dylan, it's too dynamic. If you were approved in February and you had a mild winter, you'd be cutting trees and grubbing in March.
Yep.
Trying to get ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Right, so that you could pave in May.
Yeah.
Get it, come in and post a bond, and get a building permit application or a lot release by July.
Right.
Start your construction, so then you could hopefully stabilize your lawn in October.
Yeah, yeah.
To move forward. So, it's not crystal clear, the world starts on April 15th and then November 15th. It's a year-round process.
Yeah.
It really is, but it is protected by the inspector, so that you're not doing something in what would be deemed the hardest part of the year.
Yeah.
Without someone seeing it.
Yep.
And a lot of times, especially in February, it's just not cost-effective to do anything. I mean, the developers we talked to, or the contractors rather, we talked to on Colonel Rolls, they anticipate 1 to 2 months of just shutdown time because it's just not cost-effective to do anything. But they want to at least take advantage of the good weather while they have it, and Mother Nature will tell them when it's, enough is enough, and see you in the spring.
Yeah, January is typically the switch.
Yeah.
We get frost in December sometimes, but not the 3-4 feet. But January and February, they're really hard to work.
Yeah.
They are.
Well, I don't know.
So,
I'm kind of with you, Paul. I don't know what prompted this discussion. I mean, it's a good discussion. I don't know the specifics of who said what to whom and why and where, but I think we've heard tonight, they're talking about grubbing, they're talking about moving rocks and maybe crushing it and stuff like that. And Paul, I don't know in your experience, if you agree with what they're saying, that it's been approved, it's been done, and it's not causing a problem. I could see how somebody would say that's not significant roadway construction work. And I don't have.
If you're working outside of the way, then it's not roadway construction
Yeah,
work.
so
Or if you are and it doesn't require an inspector, is it not significant?
And is there no potential for harm? I guess that's what we're looking for to leave here tonight, then. Can we work in this right of way without doing something that requires an inspection?
Well, and so, Jeff, here's.
Well,
what-
if you build a bridge abutment, would
Requires an inspection.
that would require an inspection.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
that was a bad example.
But that would be.
No,
a-
but you see the point, the things that you may be critical and could fail in the subdivision is, that's why you require inspection.
Yeah,
To pull a rock out of the ground or a stump, you can't hurt anybody doing that, and you can't hurt a future buyer doing that. And that's why you don't require an inspection.
Well, with Colonel Rolls Drive, that's a different scenario where it's the only access into the site, and in order for us to be able to get it done, now is the best time of the year to do it, because when the spring comes, we're dealing with all that high groundwater and mud.
Didn't I hear, I mean, that one you said you would bring a waiver before us.
so you are gonna bring,
Yeah, I think you have to for
Maybe
that, that's
in case
major.
of an emergency there,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, no, that particular instance, my example was just to show you that the Conservation Commission shares,
Yep.
your concerns, and in specific cases when it's justified, they do grant a waiver. So yes, I would expect that we'd have to come before you for that waiver here. But more importantly, is there something you can tell us that certain amount of work, tree cutting, grubbing, and then what's the next step? Grading?
Rough grading,
Rough
bring it up
grading.
to sub-base.
Those have typically not been considered significant activities.
do you?
And so they haven't tripped this.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
no, please.
That work has never occurred. What Doug just described, and I know he's not an engineer, but we've never in my career had someone after November 15th clearing and grading and subgrading a road. This never happened.
Okay. All right, so, Jeff, one question that I'm having, and maybe I'm actually missing this. Other than a waiver being requested, which clearly empowers this board to render a judgment on this, I'm a little unclear, because the only thing I'm seeing in the first part is that it empowers the highway superintendent to determine an emergency. So what I'm actually trying to figure out is what this board is being asked to, I guess, approve. I'm not even clear if we have the ability to approve that.
We're defining.
So you, in my opinion, you have the ability to make a determination about, or finding about what this section means. So if there is an activity that is proposed within the right-of-way, you could make a finding or a determination about whether or not the restriction applies.
So,
And if it doesn't apply, then a
So-
waiver might not be needed.
yeah.
And if it does apply, a waiver would be needed, and that would require a
Yeah.
public hearing process.
So in the interest of maybe moving this forward, I mean, is what we need to do here is understand the folks before us, each of the activities that they're asking about, and have us vote if we do or do not think that is a significant activity?
I'm not saying you should vote on that tonight, but I think in order for you to, if for a given project, I think you could potentially consider a finding about tree removal. Is that considered significant activity within the right-of-way?
Right. So I guess then I need a definition of grubbing, because what I know is grubbing is like when I try to remove the grubs from my lawn at home. I'm assuming that's not what it
No.
is. So what is grubbing?
You've historically previously defined it through the engineering department by what is,
Okay, thank you.
what requires an inspection. And why would you require an inspection unless it was significant? If it was non-significant, why are you having an inspector out there? Let me ask you that. What drives the requirement for an inspector? Because you don't inspect, there's not an inspector 24/7 when we're building this road.
Yep.
It's not a DOT job. There's an inspector out there during certain situations and certain activities. What drove that decision?
Inspector is available on projects all the time. And under my direction, with the one exception that we've all experienced
Yes.
painfully, is always on sites. And
So on sites
we
are
don't-
available.
We preempt problems and preclude problems by, we don't announce that, it's at 10:15, we're gonna do a surprise inspection on your project.
Right.
We're just out and about, and when we had an inspector, which we don't right now, so but we don't have a checklist of things that we inspect. We don't have a checklist of, we are just constantly making sure that the contractor and the developer are in compliance with decisions that have been issued by the planning board.
How can you say you don't have a list of things you inspect? It's crystal clear. It's water line installation.
I've been
it's a
doing
drainage
this for
system.
all my career, I don't have a checklist.
You don't inspect drain, it's not mandatory you inspect the drainage system as we install it daily before we backfill it?
We'll go out and do that, yeah.
Is that mandatory?
I'm not reading the regulation on that, and I'm not prepared to talk about that tonight, but we're
Well, I'm
gonna
asking you
inspect
personally.
That's beyond this, but,
Mr. Chair,
yeah.
I'm gonna have in the field,
yeah.
when these guys are telling me the ground is not frozen.
Understood.
To me,
The ground's not frozen. I just want to know, can my guys go out and cut trees on November 16th?
I think we've all said cutting trees, we don't see a problem. We don't see you, if you want to cut trees and grub and remove, spread rocks around outside of the roadway. I think, like our chair here has said, we would appreciate for each specific development that you're talking about, what is the specific work that you want to do within the right-of-way so that we can, is it just moving 3 cubic yards of dirt, or are you grubbing 1 tree out of the right-of-the-way, or are you going to be grubbing 100 trees out of the right-of-way? There's a big difference there. So if, instead of talking theoreticals, why don't you come back and tell us the specifics, and then we can say, yeah, that does not look like significant, or yes, that does look like significant.
So I will agree with Attorney DeShane and say I really don't like the way that this section is written, specifically the first very long borderline run-on sentence.
I don't like it either.
Because I think
The comma does give it a different meaning.
and the colon and everything
Yeah.
about it is not good.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting about this is that you would imply that the only thing the highway superintendent has discretion over is a case of an emergency, which is determined by the highway superintendent. However, what I'm hearing tonight is it seems like the entire first sentence was being interpreted by the highway superintendent, including what constituted a significant activity, which is what is not happening now. So,
Do we have a highway superintendent?
Not at the moment, no. There's an advertisement for it, but it's hard to get people to.
I will say that I talked to a few people when this first came up in the building community, and I said, our bylaw says you can't build in the right of way between November and April. And, yeah, every town does that. I said, no, your project's right away. You gotta be kidding me. So it was a surprise that the common knowledge was that, yeah, you don't open up the town's right of way between that period of time, but in their own developments, it was somewhat of a surprise. I have a big issue with the significant and how we define significant and not significant. I tend to agree with Mr. Guthrie that if it's not an inspectional issue, then it's not significant. Last thing I want to do is shut down these people if they don't have the openings up, their access to their sites, crossing our right-of-way to get in there. If they can't get their trucks up there or get riprap or whatever they need to get into those, because it's now November 15th. I'm not an engineer, but it just seems to make sense to me that, if they can get to where they need to be without doing what's going to be eventually affect the pavement, and I can't say what exactly that is, and I don't know, I think we should be able to shut them down.
We'd be more than happy to review any proposals for you and give you an opinion as to we don't know what's being proposed to be done.
yeah.
But we're glad to take a look at anything that's submitted to us.
Yeah,
as a
I mean,
plan.
I guess if you guys want to bring something to the December 6th meeting, like with some context of what you'd like to do and offer for ask for an engineering opinion on whether it constitutes significant, then we can certainly offer you.
We're happy to do that. I mean, we don't have a choice, and we will do that, and it makes sense, okay? In theory, I'm thinking, we'll just give you a quick little rundown of the specific work we want to do that we believe does not fall under this definition.
Yep.
Okay, and then we can get an opinion.
And to be fair.
But going forward, guys, that's really a kind of a project-by-project subjective analysis. You need to get to a point where you can define either within your bylaw or by
100%
edict of
agree,
this
Attorney
board
DeShane.
that A, B, and C do not constitute significant activity, but D through Z does. End of story, clear cut, no misinterpretation of, is it in the window, or is it when it rains, or when it snows?
Hold on. So I will say, sure, but what I take issue with, I guess with that is, you guys need to address your bylaws. I would also, though, turn that around and say, what I'm hearing is there's been a change within town staff that's causing a difference in interpretation. I will say that applicants who come before us understand the time of year that they are talking to us, and certainly this is something that could have been, what I'm actually worried about now is we're having an awful lot of communication about a project, and we're not in a public hearing right now, right? We're talking about Diane Lane, is what we are talking about.
No.
And Pearl Rolls, well, we're having conversations about.
Well, we've used examples, but no, when I say, what we need to understand is what your bylaw says, what it means by significant activity. I'm all for telling my clients they have to abide by the rules.
Right.
But when you've admitted it yourself, there's a lot of gray here in this rule, so.
Okay, so.
Together.
I'm
we
coming
need
up
to-
on 5 years, never have had this conversation before. Darren, you've been here 7, has this ever come up before?
No.
Kate?
Been on
Right.
11.
And you've been on 11. So clearly something's changed, because we've never had this conversation before in anybody on the board's recollection about this specifically, significant activity being an issue that this board needs to offer an opinion on. Okay, so.
Because there was a course of action that defined it for us up to this point.
Okay, sure, we'll take, yes.
I mean,
okay.
it was, guys.
Sure, that's fine, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. What I guess I'm taking issue with is, you guys need to address your bylaw. Well, anybody in town can put forward a recommended change to the bylaws and get that into a town hearing. And 2, applicants who come before us could certainly either be prepared to request a waiver or ask for this kind of clarification when they're getting their approval. And so it could be part of the discussion that's part of the public hearing process. That's all I'm saying going forward. There's a couple of different ways that we can skin this cat, so to speak.
I'm not suggesting that we want to change the bylaw. Just want to make
You
sure
just
that
said
we
that,
all understand it. Well.
You just said you
I
want to
would
address this in the
suggest we change
bylaw.
it so we don't have this
Rules
kind
and
of discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't have to change a single word as long as we understand, or everyone understands the meaning of significant activity.
Or at least the highway superintendent.
Whoever. I'd prefer it was just everyone knew it, so that clients don't have to worry about having someone make that call.
These
Joe,
regulations these interpretations vary town to town based on the highway superintendent.
Understood. I can definitely appreciate that, yeah. Joe,
That's okay.
can we highlight this section as something that this board should consider when we address zoning bylaw or subdivision rule and regulations amendments in the future?
Subdivision
We
rules and
will.
regulations,
We
yeah.
are,
Yeah.
the subcommittee we haven't looked at this section yet.
Okay.
Yeah, big picture, I think, looking at this and further, I've been watching this little thing the whole night, so like, I just don't see how this means shutting down an entire project for 5 months. So or 6 months.
Well, it's an unfortunate thing that their approvals came or whatever happened that they aren't ready to start working, it's just the luck of the draw too. No offense.
Yeah.
I think
to
that's a
you
huge piece of
guys.
it, the timing, absolutely, Kate. That's a huge piece of it. If this was May, we wouldn't be, right? I mean.
Right.
And Joe was kind enough to bring this to our attention, not that that's his job, but, we would have been prepared for this. I think the waiver issue is going to be difficult for you to act on because what I heard tonight, and forgive me if it's wrong, is that your town engineer doesn't support waivers, feels that they put you at risk. So I think, defining that significant activity collectively with whomever is replacing the highway superintendent, whether it be the town engineer or your DPW director, but somehow getting to the definition of that significant activity for the situations that we're in now.
Yep.
And then moving forward, whether it be spelled out or, again, determined by the town engineer or the DPW director, kind of clarifies that because that's how we did function for 30 years of my career until we don't have a highway superintendent. So I think that's where we've entered into new personnel with new interpretation, and that varies by town, it varies by personnel. It happens, I get it, it varies by building inspector, it varies by town planner, land use director. Everybody has their interpretation, and that's what makes the process, I guess, so good. But, we're caught a little bit here off guard, and we're looking for a little direction and to do work in town
I guess like we have in the past, without putting the town at risk.
Yep.
And, you know, I think we've sort of, in our opinion, defined that by what is required by inspection, but we'll,
Yeah.
Sure. Submit our little stories.
But does he, Bob, do you have any other comments here?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Listening in.
All right. Good. All right, so I guess
Thank you for your time.
see
We
you
do
on December
appreciate
6th?
it.
No, this
Really,
is,
at the end of the day, we just want to make it easier for all of us, right? For you guys, for us, just so that we're all up to speed on the same laws, and then we work within them, you know?
and as Jeff has mentioned, we do have a subcommittee that is going through the rules and regs, trying to modernize them, make them more readable, understandable, so we always appreciate input from the people who have to live with the rules, and what makes it, what's not clear to you, what you think is outdated and such, so that we want to get all viewpoints, so, no, this is a good discussion. We were just thrown off, at least I was, because we just get these two highlighted things with no understanding of why we're getting them to look at, so I appreciate your time in explaining it.
we appreciate you listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Okay, thanks very much.
So we're, at this point, we're not planning on accelerating our process for retaining the services of a third-party inspector, unless you direct me otherwise. That my plan was, like every other year, we would wait until, February or March.
Yep.
And start doing that search.
I would say unless there's a waiver that's been approved, then
Yeah,
I would.
right, yeah, and I mean that, we'll rise to whatever occasion you call us to, and we'll get somebody, and we'll cover things, and we'll do what we need to do, just like we did for the tree clearing out at Diane. We're not trying to certainly get in the way
Right.
of development, not that they would allow us anyway, so.
Right.
But, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Paul.
Paul.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thanks, Paul.
Okay.
That was great. Helpful context.
That was the only general business item that we had. At this point, we are on to correspondence, reports, and
Minutes.
updates.
Minutes.
And that includes the minutes. So give me 1 second to get the actual minutes
I
that we're
just have
approving.
one correction.
So, is there a motion to approve the October 18th, 2021 Planning Board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion about the content of the minutes?
I did, on page 1, line 42, 43. I did not request that the plans get updated to reflect the removal of trees as well as the retaining walls. My comment was that the landscape plan was difficult to read, and I recommended that things that were going to be, and my comment was that the plans were difficult to read because they included things that were being removed, as well as, I don't know how to state it, but I didn't want them to get updated to reflect that they're there. It's just the fact that they're there made it hard to read the plans. And
Okay.
let me,
Joe, did you get that?
you think you can figure out what I'm trying to say?
I think so. I think, as I recall, your issue was, there was a plan that showed existing trees, as well as trees to maybe be removed. There also proposed, it was too much information about the trees on the same page that made it confusing.
It was hard to read what was being added, what was being removed, yeah.
Okay. I think we can capture that thought.
I think they agreed with that, too.
Yep.
I think that, wait a minute. I just had a question. It has nothing to do with, well, why don't, on 60 Elm Road, because we approved it,
Yep.
I'm just, because I was reading ZBA stuff, and I saw that the applicant withdrew the ZBA application.
They requested that, and the board will act on that this Wednesday night.
So
that
if they approve that, then our approval is moot?
No, we were doing something else on that, right? That was the water
Floodplain.
floodplain.
But
So-
wasn't it I don't know.
I don't believe that it was.
Contingent on the greater footprint and stuff, okay.
So you have an approval that stands on its own. They just, from a practical standpoint, would not be able to exercise
Okay.
that approval unless they secured other permissions through another public hearing process.
Okay.
Any other adjustments to the minutes, Kate?
No.
Okay. Bob, any adjustments to the minutes?
No, I have none.
Mike?
Nope.
Darren?
Yeah, on line 72, Weist is spelled incorrectly. It's W-I-Z-S-T.
Nice catch. Any other?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from October 18th. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Darren?
Aye.
I say aye. All right, we're done with correspondence, reports, and updates. There's nothing else in the packet. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Mike? Aye. Darren?
Aye.
I say aye. Thank you very much. Have a nice night.
Thanks. All right.